All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Increasing Influence with Miles, Big's Ideas, and Dave Cooper. What's happening, Miles?
Good afternoon. Happy Thursday to you and to everybody watching.
Yeah, no, happy Thursday, right? I mean, beautiful day where I'm at in Alabama. I don't know what it's like up in Pennsylvania right now.
Oh my gosh, it is freezing. It's like with the wind chill, it's below zero right now.
Oh, is it? You know, believe it or not, where I'm at in Alabama, it's going to get down to the teens tonight with the wind chill. About 28 degrees, I think, is what the temperature is going to go to. So in Alabama, who would have thought?
Not me. Yeah, it's certainly not me.
Well, listen, we got a great show lined up today, Miles. We are taking flight with Lockheed Martin today. How cool is that? We're going to have JT Ramsay join us in just a few moments. I mean, give me a break, dude. This guy's been with Ford. He's with Lockheed Martin. He was with Comcast. And he's just kind of a cool cat, I think. I've been enjoying having the pre-show talk with him.
Yeah, likewise. And his resume, most people would love to have one companies on their resume, and he's got them all. So it's certainly a wealth of knowledge that we're ready to tap.
Yeah, for sure. All right, everybody. But before we get into this, at Dave Cooper, we are bringing you the people and the processes that are doing it better. Our guests and topics include building systems, building science, building codes, to the tech used to build it better. Today, we are talking about increasing influence, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Social media is where the world is today. Getting out there in the digital world is super, super important, and today is no different. Miles, we are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And why are we live on Twitch, Miles?
Because that is where the younger people are, the next generation for the housing industry.
Oh, next generation is for sure, right? That's where they're at. So that's where we're going. We've been getting some traction there, which is a lot of fun. But eventually you're going to find out us old folks aren't so bad. I love it. Well, why don't we jump into it and bring JT in? What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, Mr. JT Ramsay, how are you, sir?
Amazing. How are you?
I'm doing great. I think I'm inspired to get a mustache like you have going. I love it.
You know, everybody's done the quarantine beard, and to mix it up, I just shaved the beard off and kept the mustache. I'll tell you this life hack. Wearing a mask all the time really helps cover up the mustache. So, just a pro tip for the audience.
I love it. That's an awesome pro tip tip. So listen, JT, this is, I can already tell we're going to go down all kinds of windy roads. This is going to be the episode called the Burma Road, right? So let's first, before we get started, I would like for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. We want to know everything from the moment you were born to this very moment in time. And you have about 3 to 5 minutes to do it. So go ahead. Let's hear it.
No, great. I have been in digital and social since you had to code the page to write on it. Lived several lifetimes. My deep background, I was a music critic for a number of years, and really almost exclusively on the digital side, writing for a variety of websites that no longer exist for the most part. I mean, that's, part of the magic of the digital space from, 99 to present. But then, in 2010, I went from being on the editorial side to being on the other side of the editorial side. I jumped into corporate communications, where I was Comcast's second chief blogger. And, what a tremendous experience to join that team and that function as we were, finalizing the NBC Universal acquisition. I mean, just such an exciting time in the company, such an exciting space to be in as, the telco space was transforming so rapidly. Really dynamic environment, so many smart people, getting to work with, not only, all the amazing, communicators there, but also, working with the products and the people behind them and getting to tell their stories. It was a really great introduction into the communication space. I was fortunate to spend some time at Ford Motor Company. I moved my family to Detroit, which was, honestly an underrated experience, and one, that I really highly recommend. The Midwest is a really wonderful place, and For those of us who, like me, grew up on the 95 corridor here on the East Coast in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. It was amazing to go 600 miles west and spend some time up in the mitten. So lots of great memories, and really getting to work on a lot of the emerging opportunities at Ford, especially in the mobility space, but then also working again on some iconic product announcements along the way. And then this past spring, amid all of everything that was unfolding in early March, I started at Lockheed, where I'm on a fantastic and talented team. And something I'm really grateful for is being able to bring the wealth of experience I've gotten at other companies in different industries, and really bring to bear what I've learned there to Lockheed Martin. And as we think about the kinds of stories we want to tell, the channels we want to tell them on, the audiences we want to reach, and who we want to influence, and then really what we want to deliver for the business. So thank you for having me on.
No, we appreciate having you on. Miles, go ahead, kick this one off, man. I know your mind's just reeling at the moment.
Well, I'm curious to sort of ground definitions for people watching that might not know the difference. We talk about social and digital, sort of gets lumped into marketing, and then use the term, I think, corporate communications, you said. So what's the difference between corporate communications and digital marketing?
I love this. So, I think to be really successful in, the digital social space today, you've got to, think like a marketer, but have the sensibility of, someone who works in communications. And what that means is, you've got to be able to boil down, your message into something that's easily digestible, but then you've also got to understand the environment you're communicating in. And if we've learned nothing over the last decade, is two things. One, the communications environment is very volatile. There's all manner of things that are happening all the time. So you really have to be, that nervous system for your organization, and really be dialed into, the communications environment. But then you've also got to think about, is what we're producing going to get anybody's attention with that consideration in mind? So how can you really distill your message into something that people can, understand, and then, ideally also remember. So that's really that distinction. But I think that they really work hand in hand.
Yeah, and I love that what you just said. Message that people can understand and then remember, right? And all the brands you rattled off that you work for, I think, do great jobs at that. They're part of why they're the giants that they are. How can the little guys watching, right? We're primarily home builders. They're not to the size of Lockheed Martin. How can they be just as good, if not better, than Lockheed Martin at getting their message clear and also making it memorable?
So a few things. I mean, I think you need to really look hard at what your priorities are, and then look at them again, right? You've got to ask yourself, okay, resources are finite. That's true in any organization. So how do I make them work as hard as possible for me? And so, you've got to pick your spots, right? Like, you might have to ask yourself, if you're going into a trade show, are you going to get more attention the day this trade show kicks off, or are you going to get more attention a week before? I think that those are, that planning component is so critical. And I think oftentimes we get caught up in the moment of needing to produce content. And I think it's a trap. I think that, producing content at very high volume, may not, produce the kinds of results you think they will. But especially in particular industries, anything that's like related to manufacturing, right? Like, manufacturing's all about outputs. So then there's I think there's a tendency in manufacturing industries in particular to think about, okay, what is my throughput as a measurement of success, versus, oh no, what do I want this particular piece of communication to accomplish for me? How do I want to put a message out into the world that makes people, think about the organization, I'm leading, in the way I'd like them to, versus maybe some of, their assumptions about it, or if they don't know anything about it, like, just kind of a gap for them. So, to me, I think it's really critical to, to be intentional about how you build your comms and marketing plans around priorities, around tentpole moments, and then invest accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, putting that digital plan in place, so to speak, or that storyboard, if we want to call it that, in place for what that story is going to be, is definitely crucial, especially on the organizational side, as from a company standpoint. And when you're writing these stories, I mean, how do you capture people's attention today? How do you capture why do they want to read what you're doing? So if you're going to write something, you obviously don't put in the subject line the answer to what you're writing, right? You're going to put something that catches them. I'll give you an example for us, and you can critique me because I am by far not nearly as experienced as you. But we were in Alabama. We went to the Space Center here, right? This is the Rocket City. NASA's up the road, and they have this Space Center for kids here. I mean, it's a really cool place. And we had Interspace Modular on from the United Kingdom. So I did a video saying, hey, we're going to space, sort of. And that was kind of the catchy headline on it. Was that right to do it that way? Because I kind of like fudge. Am I pulling people? I had a rocket ship behind me. So I often wonder, what's the best approach to doing these things?
Well, I think that, you have to keep in mind, like, and this is something that, I think is really important, and I talk about a lot. Like, you've got to think about, your channels, you got to think about your audience, and then you've got to think about, like, the content you're going to deliver to them. What might work for you might not work for an organization, right? I mean, you've got, a variety of different stakeholders in an organization who may have, thoughts and feelings about, how you go to market, right? So, to me, it's, really understanding that audience and thinking, like, okay, well, how do I get that person to care about this thing? I've got to be able to answer that question, which is something that, is a commonplace, having come from, a media background. Yeah. When you're in pitch meetings, you have to answer the who cares question, and you've got to deal with that rejection all the time. And I think that's your starting point, is really as you're planning, is asking, like, okay, who is my audience and why should they care about this? And then you can start to produce that content that you think is going to pay it off for them, so that they want to, not only engage it, but then, maybe want to work with you.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Miles.
So what do you do when the answer to that who cares question is no one? Nobody cares. You're screaming into the black hole of the internet and you're not getting anything in return. What do you do to fix that?
You've got to build relationships.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a huge part of it. You've got to build relationships. And, it's interesting, early in my career, as a communicator, a breakthrough I had was, hey, like, there are times where you think the answer is, to put something out on social media, and really, like, depending on who you're trying to reach, it might be sending them an email. Like, right. That, I think is when we think about, channel strategy, you've got to ask yourself, when you're kind of like looking at all the channels at your disposal, and those might include, being at a conference. Like, a conference is a channel. There's a great talk, and I'll share a link that Bosma St. John gave with Kara Swisher when she was when Boz was at Uber, and she basically gave a masterclass on channel strategy. And so and that comes from, well, what's the kind of relationship I have with that audience, and then what kind of content might get them to pay attention to something that you think won't get anybody's attention.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting though. You say, knowing your audience and then knowing the channel that you're going to reach your audience. What about people that are just starting out? Miles and I started this whole conversation because we were doing things within our verticals of business. and everybody always says, why are you guys doing this? Why, and eventually we just said, why don't we just have a show called Increasing Influence and just talk about why we're doing this? If you're just starting out, though, maybe you don't always know who the audience is because you have something to say. You're still trying to feel your way through. What do you do in that case when you're really still trying to figure out who is my direct audience going to be?
Well, right. I mean, I think then the opportunity is really limitless, right?
Yeah.
I think that, the opportunity there is to just be in a test and learn and just try different things. Now, that doesn't mean, just do stunts constantly and expect people to, want to come back. I mean, you're going to, that's got diminishing returns. How are you going to top it the next time? But, I think also, part of it is just starting, and then, as what you're describing, just keep doing it and build that audience.
Yeah.
Build an audience around an area of expertise, and become a credible, a credible source, right? I mean, that's, that to me, like building that trust with the audience is really crucial.
Yeah, for sure. See, Miles, I was helping you out there.
I agree to that too. And one of the things I've said on here before is I think part of building that trust is showing up consistently. Like you said, can't do stunts all the time. You also can't just pop in and pop out of people's lives willy-nilly and expect them to want to come back and listen to what you have to say. So it's just showing up. I feel like anything in school, they say going to class is half the battle towards getting an A. I think the same can be said for when you're putting content out there. You got to show up first.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Hey, why don't we take a second and go to the comments? We got some funny stuff happening. All right, let's take a look. So first we have John Allen Girangelo, I think is how you say it. If I mess that up, don't tear me up. But persistence of a marketer. I love it. I think you might know this person, Carrie O'Shea. We're going.
She's great.
Hi, JT. Hey, Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today. How awesome is that? Look at it. Oh, we got Jennifer. She went over to Twitch. All right, you Twitch folks. We need you young people out there, whether you like us or not. Give us some comments. Talk to us. Simon Sinek says start with why, and Miles Biggs adds, who cares?
Yeah.
I love it. And then all the way across, we're in France now with Henry Mickelberg. Skunk Works, 7R71, Mach 3, Sonic Boom causes chimney to fall over. No more marketing required.
I don't think that's the best practice.
I love it. I didn't mean to derail us there, but had to have a little bit of fun getting it started here. So absolutely. All right, let's continue with this conversation, Miles. Go for it. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. I'm curious, JT, what's your experience been with personal brands inside of a big brand? Because again, like Dave said, it's kind of how we started. Is we were both creating our own content, building our own personal brands, while also both working in an established company. Yeah. So what's that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I mean, as it pertains, for instance, just to, executive social, for instance, right? You've got to really define swim lanes, so that it's like, oh, that's, and this is true for offline too. I think that something that gets lost is in so much of the digital social conversation is, these are things that pertain, offline as well. You don't want there to be confusion in the marketplace about who's the expert, at your organization about X, Y, or Z. It's if you're talking about X, it's this person, it's at these levels. They're the experts. They're the people that are going to show up in your media when you're pitching. That I think is critical, and that is precisely what you're describing. It is that drumbeat. You don't want to push the button too much, right? You want it to be purposeful. Again, I mean, attention's a scarce resource. This is something we've been talking about as digital social professionals for millennia, seemingly. But if attention's a scarce resource, you've got to, when you're planning, you've got to package everything up that you want to achieve, have it all make sense internally, and then think about how that's going to come to life across the variety of channels that you may be, leveraging when you're making news or you're marketing.
Yeah. That again just points to the planning you talked about before. You can't do everything you just said whenever you feel like it. It's part of a very purposeful approach to the way you and your company shows up in the world.
Well, and I think that, when I look back, at, when you look back on social in like 2010, 2008 to 2010, we weren't talking about, paid in the way we do today, right? So everything could be done, through organic reach, and it was just, push it out there and look at how, the message, reaches the audience. Isn't this amazing? Well, yeah, I mean, that was the carrot to get you hooked on that distribution channel. And then you started to need to pay to reach that audience, right? And you see this now. I mean, you see people talking about, the explosive growth of TikTok and, the video engagement that's happening there. Well, yeah, I can remember a similar story from some of the other platforms previously as they look to drive, their business outcomes. And I think that, part of the challenge of that planning and about that channel, distribution work that you're going to do is also remembering all these platforms we're using are also businesses unto themselves. So they have their own priorities. And then you've got to figure out like, okay, well, do I want to, jump on TikTok and just get a bunch of explosive video growth if that's not going to be something that's sustainable? But you're going to create some expectations within your organization. I think that you've got to think about these platforms as as companies with priorities, and if one of them, for instance, is delivering video views, well, of course that's going to be the flavor of the week. And so from where I sit, part of the job is really educating around those trends. Kind of watching out for some of that shiny object syndrome that happens in organizations where, people, I know everybody says, I don't love vanity metrics. Everybody loves vanity metrics. People get so pumped about, video views and hey, those are important. Those are important measures, but that, video views alone don't necessarily drive a sale. And I think connecting those two things and building out that attribution model is something that, once again, like fits for both, marketers and for communicators.
Speaking of shiny toys, what's your thoughts on Clubhouse? It's like the new social media darling.
Oh no. I'm always fascinated. I'm so glad you brought this up. So I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated for a variety of reasons. But one of them is that, in some respects, it's like, okay, what if terrestrial radio, but for conference calls? Like that's something that really jumps out, where it's like, suddenly you get a notification, you pop in there, you may hear a familiar voice speaking, maybe it's somebody you're following. But yeah, I mean, it's wild. I think, I haven't played with it enough. But you can see ways that it could be very useful, for comms and marketing, and especially like from a thought leadership perspective, right? I mean, it is an evolution of podcasts in some respects. And so I think that's great, especially, right now, so many people, like, I'm fortunate, we don't do a ton of Zoom calls.
Right.
So I don't feel like that Zoom exhaustion from performing. And as you can tell, I don't hate it. But I can see how people will be worn out by that. And so you can, with Clubhouse, you can listen passively to a conversation that you might take something away from, and that can just kind of be happening in the background. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But of course, to the shiny object piece, I'm glad, my boss hasn't kicked my, virtual door down to say, why aren't we on, Clubhouse? You've got it when you're evaluating, new platforms, you've got to be thoughtful about it, right? I mean, gone are the days where it's just like, hey, we're a large corporation, let's just stand something up. Like, you've got to have a plan in place before you jump on a platform like that. But I think Clubhouse could be a lot of fun.
I mean, that's kind of it though, right? Like, where do you go? Like, we got LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Clubhouse, TikTok, we're doing TikTok as well. I mean, eventually either you run out of money to hire people or you run out of bandwidth to have all these different conversations, because part of the social media is the conversational side of it, right? That's why you're reaching out. That's why you're doing it, because it's supposed to be quote unquote social. So, like Miles, you sent me the Clubhouse thing. I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but I'm feeling the urge and I'm feeling like I'm falling behind. And I think that's what social media does, right? Because I do like shiny new objects.
Well, I think what's interesting about Clubhouse is that it does kind of create FOMO in a way podcast doesn't, because you can go and listen to the podcast on demand whenever you want. If you miss the start of that Clubhouse room, you're popping in the middle of a conversation, and it takes a little bit to figure out what's the heck's going on, and you can't necessarily go back and listen to it. So I think that's something that has going for it. I also think it's just interesting, like you said, JT, about the Zoom fatigue. You know, you can have it on and you kind of wait for your moment to shine, or if you start a room, I see it as a good way to test stuff. It's like a stand-up comedian playing a bunch of smaller clubs until they record their Netflix special. Yeah. You can create a room and like test out keynote ideas or what you do want to record a podcast on and see if anybody even cares in that little ecosystem, and then bring it into something else. But it's super. Yeah, I've enjoyed kind of hanging out on it and seeing what other people are doing right now too.
No, I love that. I mean, and you know, Dave, to your point on, you know, where do you want to spend your time? You know, let the data set you free, right? Like, you know, I think a lot of you know, organizations like probably underutilize some of the data, and you know, there's this reflex, you know, that if something doesn't work, that, you know, you don't want to talk about that. And when I see things that, and this is as close to like fail fast as I'm really going to get, but, you know, when I see things that are, you know, might be classified as failures, it's like, okay, well, so what do we think didn't work?
Right. And
is it something to fix, or is this something, you know, from a start, stop, continue standpoint, do we just let this go? And what might we do instead? So, you know, to your point about, you know, the resources and the bandwidth, well, yeah, that's true for everybody and for large and small organizations. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you have to, you know, try things out, but then if it's not delivering for you, then put that energy elsewhere. You know, there's no, you know, limit to the opportunity, but, you know, you've got to, know what to cut. So, you know, that's a recommendation, you know, for anybody that's watching. You know, really like lean hard on that data, and you know, and if something, you know, if you feel like you're not, you know, getting that, you know, return on investment, everybody thinks is money. I mean, it's also actual time. So you know, you really take that seriously.
Yeah, for sure. Here we go. We got some more comments coming in. Let's put them up there, and then I want to continue on this working in an organization conversation. When Miss JT's wicked smart, as we say, Boston natives say. I love it. Henry's back at it again. He says, cards on the table. I tuned in for some Lockheed Martin Skunk Works antidotes. So we're gonna have to dive into the bowels of Lockheed Martin's social media strategy, I think is where we're going there. And we got good old Bill Ryman. What's happening, Bill, out of Florida? He has his own podcast as well. People buy into you, power of video marketing. They see who you are. If they like you, they will likely work with you. Now, that's super, super true, just because I know that, because that's how I started. JT, you probably remember Bob Vila, right?
Of course.
Remember this old house? Well, that's kind of how I got started in video. I was doing Bob Vila on the homes we were building. That's and amazing. I was just doing them, but I was doing them live. They weren't pre-recorded. I was just going live on Facebook, walking through all of our houses, talking about the good, bad, the ugly, you know, everything that happens with it. And what Bill's saying is really true. You build relationships with people this way. People get to know you on their time, is what I say, when you're doing reality TV like we do here. And yeah, I'd be interested to have your opinion on that, because corporate position, it's different, I think.
Well, I mean, it is and it isn't, right? I mean, you know, maybe the delivery is a bit different, but, you know, something, you know, I think is really critical is capturing like the people behind the products.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, look, like when you've got, you know, you've got to cut yourself some slack. Like chances are your people stories aren't going to go like the same places like a product story might, right? Yeah. When you're talking about something, you know, like a Mustang, or you're talking about, you know, a jet, those are exciting things. Those are that drives a certain kind of engagement from enthusiasts in particular when you're thinking about like organic social. But if what you're chasing is that deeper relationship, you've got to show that, bench depth, right? And you've got to start to bring to life, the personalities that, are creating these products and services. And I think that just gives you, but it's just more cracks at it, right? I mean, it's, again, like, think about comms and marketing. I coach Little League. Like, it's at bats. Like, if you strike out in the first inning, well, you're gonna come to bat again, and
Right.
really focus on that next at bat, and test and learn, iterate. Just jargon ahoy. But really bring it to bear. Don't just say those words. Like, think about, like, okay, what kind? Again, it comes back to audience. It's like, what is that audience really want to get from me? What kind of relationship do they want to have with the organization? And try different things. So that's a pretty direct recommendation about how you approach content development.
Yeah, for sure. You reminded me, Kenny Rogers had a song about the little boy batting. Have you ever heard this song? He kept throwing the ball up in the air, and he'd swing and he'd miss. And it's a video series, and he just kept doing it. And you started really feeling bad for the kid because he put his head down and he couldn't do it. Threw it up again, and he swung and he missed. And all of a sudden, he just looks and he smiles. He goes, "I'm the greatest pitcher in the world." Right?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it's a matter of perspective.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, but meanwhile, you're looking from the outside in here. You think this kid's feeling all bad for himself, and then he just said, "Well, I'm the best pitcher in the world." I love it. All right, let's get back into. I'm the one derailing this conversation each go of the way here. I'm having fun with it though. Being an influencer within an organization, like you said, you have to be thoughtful of what you do. I've done it. Miles has done it in the past. Do organizations embrace that? Do they not embrace it? What is your opinion on how that works? If you do have somebody that, hey, loves social media, they're doing it and they're talking about their work in a very passionate way, and they're talking about Lockheed Martin, is that a good thing or a bad thing in the company's eyes, or will they let it run?
No, I mean, I think, one of the things we have that's really tremendous is a well-established employee advocacy program.
Yeah.
And, something, throughout my career, that I found, useful is building an employee advocacy program that makes it easy for employees to share content, right? And I think that one of the things, folks maybe missed, before the existence of the software that supports, employee advocacy is, just that your employees, as well informed as they may be, if a story breaks and it was a leak and they see something on a site or a blog that they like, they're not sitting in, the communications department. That might be a project they're working on and they're very excited about it. So, to me, I think, being able to give employees some guardrails so they can share safely, is fantastic. I think the challenge, right, is that, really setting expectations around those kinds of programs. It's great to have, stories come to life through, your employee base, because that peer-to-peer thing is what we're all after. Right.
Yeah.
End of the day, like, yes, we produce this content, but we produce this content because we want it to be a part of some other conversation where, you ask, somebody, in your kitchen, hey, did you see that thing? And you have a conversation about it, because that goes back to that message pull through. Is this memorable? Was it worth sharing? I mean, all of those things, we know in the social space are really crucial. So, I think where you get more sophisticated with it, right, goes back to that earlier point about the swim lanes, right? I think, there are tools that enable you to look at, hey, wow, did you know we have somebody who works over here in AI, for instance, who's an influencer unto themselves? I think that's something that a lot of companies, can miss. If you don't, kind of look inward for those experts who have already built audiences, and then think like, hey, we've got a story coming up that'd be great for that person to share. Let's send that email.
Right.
Let's have that person drop that in to a forum of engineers where, they'll be able to get peer-to-peer feedback on whatever it is you're trying to say. And that can have a bunch of different hooks. It's not only that you may be trying to, generate news. It might be that you're trying to get people, interested in working for your company. And I think that those are all of the things that, head on a swivel, we in digital and social, like, have to, kind of go through as almost a checklist, if not an actual checklist, when you're doing that comms planning in the upfront.
So how often do you do the planning? Is it a once a year thing, once a quarter thing? When do you create this plan and revisit this plan?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wish it were that simple, right? Really, like, what you look at is, an annual plan, and then you may be able to look out, a quarter or two. And ideally, right, like, you have some seasonality, like, that, you've got a trade show coming up and you're trying to figure out what your newsmakers are for that, that event. And then you can plan accordingly, and you can figure out what your pre-show, messages, what you want to really drive home at the show, and if there are any, takeaways that follow it. But, for the most part, especially in digital social, I mean, of course, there are always things that are going to pop up that you're going to want to bring to life. And so that's where, having, to the extent you can plan ahead, it makes it so much easier to do the work of, things that kind of pop up in real time, because you feel good about the things you were able to already, put in process ahead of time. And, you can use your limited resources on the things that are happening, immediately. So, that's a yes and answer.
Sure.
You try to look out, especially on the marketing side, right? Like, you try to look out and think about your campaigns, and then your communications stuff. And this is kind of the peso, model, the paid, earned, shared, owned, where you're looking across, you're looking at everything you want to do through those lenses, so you can build out an integrated comms plan.
Yeah. I love it. So I want to pull this back a little bit, back to employees, and the general population. We get a lot of students that watch our channel, mm-hmm. and so forth. How important with personal branding and looking for a job, like where does it begin and end with a corporation looking to hire somebody, out of college, out of school? Like, what are things people should be, being careful of, but at the same time, what shouldn't they be careful of? What should they be putting out there?
I mean, I think that, there's any number of ways to look at this, right? I mean, I think that, you want to be able to demonstrate expertise, but and as I noted, like, for instance, like, I don't do talks like this all the time, because really my focus is on, the work that's in front of me. Yeah. So you want to balance that, where you're illustrating that you're doing the work. That's the stuff that comes to life on your CV. But, you want to be able to go out and say, hey, like, I know a thing. Here's what I know. And I think actually, even better is sharing what you don't know, like having that kind of vulnerability where you're able to invite people to engage with you in a way that could be, mutually beneficial, where you're learning something, or just offering to help people. I mean, obviously in the last year, friends and peers, have gone through all sorts of things, with the pandemic. And, to me, thinking about what you're describing from a position of servant leadership, how can I be helpful to those in my life? I think that those are, other ways to consider, personal branding, so that it's not just about, demonstrating expertise. I'm an expert, like, look at me. It's, how can you be more multifaceted than that? Because, being on the market, isn't that different from, what kind of extracurriculars are you doing, right? When you're trying to go to college, so, to me, I think, being, demonstrating that you're a real live human person, is something, that's critical, because you're not just a marketing automaton. I think that's crucial.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Go ahead, Miles.
Just smiling and nodding because I agree. And I've used that extracurricular example a lot, because I've had some people take issue with me personally in my career with stuff I do outside of the 9 to 5. And that's always my response. It's like, we praise all these people going off to college for all the things they've done in high school, and you want that on a resume. And then what? We're supposed to be chained to our desks and then, die with no hobbies, right? It's silly. So I agree with everything you're saying. I think it's been huge for me. Everything I've done like this, in addition to, what the day job is, always comes back and fuels the day job, allowing me to be better at what I'm doing or bring in outside resources from my outside activities into the company I work for.
I think that's really important what you just touched on, right? Like we are such a mastery culture, where you two things, you want to be perceived as an expert and have all the answers, and you want to be able to say yes, to a request, right? So you're trying to always marry those two things up. And, something I've learned, especially when it comes to digital social, since things are changing at such a pace, it's just pausing just a beat and saying, hey, let me look into that for you. And so from a personal branding perspective, it's just about being thoughtful, right? It's not immediately, thinking like, yes, I know this is the exact right answer. Something I've learned is, are my gaps. And I really try to, have like a high level of self-awareness when it comes to them, so that I can collaborate, differently and better. And I think that's a crucial part of, being a colleague who can really add value.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to take a step back here. Carrie is at it again. I'm on Clubhouse, but I have strictly listen policy. I heard a celebrity in there say, hey, can I shoot you a photo real quick? And the other person was like, no, Clubhouse doesn't do that. I love it.
Amazing.
So we love to interact with everybody that's out there. So all of you that are liking and sharing this right now, we thank you very much. We got a lot of people here floating on social media as well as LinkedIn. So this is cool. All right, JT, listen, this is the fastest hour of your life, right? We're at 46 minutes already. That's hard to believe. It is amazing. So JT, somebody's just, getting started. In social media, they don't have the experience you have. What's that one piece of advice you would just give somebody that says, hey, I know I need to be on social media, or do they not need to be on social media? And if I do need to be on social media, what would I do to start?
Wow. That's an amazing question.
That's taking you back, right?
It really, it does, because, so much of where we are now, is just built around inertia. So everybody's on all these platforms all the time, seemingly. Yeah. I think a couple of thoughts. One, I think you've got, again, to come back to, what's the audience I'm trying to reach? But then you've got to even step back beyond that. It's like, think about these different channels. Is the business that I have, does it make sense for it to be on Instagram? Right? Like, who am I trying to reach? Do I need to think about Snapchat? What is it? Like, what is it that I'm trying to achieve with these things? Start there first, right? And then really, immerse yourself in it. Play with these tools. Thinking back, this is great. You just triggered an amazing memory. So, early in my career, when I was still on the music critic side, I started playing with social media because, I was working at the time for Comcast.net, and it was a portal. It was a classic web portal, and social media offered an opportunity to engage new and different audiences. So I started to play with that a little bit, and really enjoyed the Twitter piece of it. But I wasn't really doing anything with Facebook then from a pages standpoint. And so then I did something that was completely bananas, and I started a campaign to bring the Athletics back to Philadelphia from Oakland. And what I learned through that experience, even though it had been 50, 60 years since the A's had been in Philadelphia, was a couple things, and it goes into the peso approach. I only had an earned strategy, but I set up a page on Facebook to support this silliness. And then I started reaching out to people, and I started to talk to people and really leverage the relationships I had with local media, with folks who are in the baseball community. And then, I found myself on the local news. I was in the paper. I was, talking to bloggers, and that was something where I'm like, oh no, like this social thing, this hobby of mine, because I have a bad habit of turning hobbies into jobs. Like this hobby of mine could be a real life thing. And now here we are, 11 years later.
Right.
So, you've got to experiment. And again, like, it's not exclusively an online thing. Like you've got to work the offline pieces. It's not magic. Like you've got to, pull all the levers to make it work for you.
Yeah, for sure. And when you say offline pieces, give me some examples of what that would mean.
Phone call.
Oh, you mean talk to somebody?
I mean, phone call,
Physically?
email, a meeting, like a networking event, those, hey, like I'm not saying it's easy. Right. And I think that, that's something where, in my career, I've consulted with small and medium-sized businesses, and you've kind of got to Goldilocks your digital social strategy, right? Again, you've got finite resources. So you've got to think about, to the point made earlier about just showing up, you've got to figure out, like, how do you pace yourself? Because, especially for small businesses, you've got to be everywhere simultaneously. Right. You're doing it. I mean, I have friends who are restaurateurs. I mean, they are pulling every lever, and I don't know where they muster the energy, but that's a part of it. And you've got to pace yourself and be thoughtful about, okay, well, I'm doing this here in social, but if I spend more time, scrolling through this timeline, that means I'm not doing something else. So, you've really got to be mindful and budget your time accordingly.
Miles, you say that all the time. You say it all the time about there's time. People say I don't have time. There's time, but less reality TV, less social media scrolling. I say to everybody, and Miles, I'll let you get on your bandwagon and your soapbox with that, but it's true. I don't have time to watch other people's stuff. I want to because I can learn something.
That's right.
But it just comes down to producing what we produce. And I think it's an interesting situation to be in. And small business is the same way, no matter what it is, right? Do you put food on the table? Do you work with the chef? Do you do social media posts? Who runs the register? There's all those different things that are pulling at you. And who's making the grocery order? Right? That's a lot.
Yeah. Then you've got life outside of all of it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. But Miles, you say that all the time about there's time, and because you coach people all the time and say, hey, I don't have time.
Yeah. So many people it's comfortable to believe that. And it's not comfortable to actually jump into action mode. Right. So whenever anybody tells me they don't have time, I ask them to catalog where they're actually spending their time.
Yeah.
Some simple like journaling. From the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, what are you doing and for how long? And then you can realize you can trim minutes from here, there, and everywhere to actually have this time that magically didn't exist before to do what you want to do. And then to your point, JT, and then you got to figure out how to maximize that time. You can spend that time doing any number of things. What's going to give you the biggest return for your time? And then after you test and try things, you figure out where to focus and go all in.
Yeah. No, I think you make a great point. I mean, I think that if there are, two things, I mean, one, really like train yourself on project management, right? Like that is not just something you just know how to do, right? You've got to, think about when we're talking about planning, it's like, okay, like how do I chart this out? Like, where do I need to be, in X, number of days, to make sure that this program comes to life the way I want it to. And then additionally in organizations, larger organizations, part of that education thing I talked about earlier, like, whether you like it or not, especially on the digital social side, you're doing change management. and you've got to acknowledge that. And that's another area where, I think it's critical for you to, think about like, okay, what am I trying to accomplish, and how do I bring, this audience on that journey? So when you talk about influence, it's not only external, it's also, especially in matrixed organizations, it's internal as well.
Yeah, for sure. It truly is. And, I say do it scared. You just got to start somewhere too, though. The being planful and being mindful of where you're going and how you have to get there is one part of it. But if you overthink it, you're not going to get anywhere, and that's the other part of it. So there's a whole part of this being planful and starting, and especially in social media, so many people are worried about what people are going to say about them, or they're scared to put it out there. Even like you say, right? If you're too safe, nobody's going to care.
That's right. No, I mean, and you've got to do work that's worth paying attention to.
That's right.
And you've got to give people a reason, to want to hear what you're saying. You've got to use that content to build that relationship, so that it's not something where, they check you out once and then walk away. And you've got to figure out like how you're going to continue to engage that audience and make them, think that you're a trusted partner. I mean, that's really what you want to be to your customer. And so, that's something that's really, critical for people to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But, it's social media just lets you build that trust if you do it right. If you come across genuine, and no matter what you're doing, whether it's corporation or whether you're a small business or, a one-man show or one-woman show, you can really build a lot of trust. And sometimes it's scary. And I say it all the time, because people start talking to me and I don't know who they are, but they're talking as if they know me, and you sit there and you gotta kind of reel it in for a minute and be like, that's the power of what video and social media just in general can do for you. And it's a very powerful tool that I think in this day and age is more necessary more than ever. Nobody's traveling. Like you said, phone calls are important now because you're not out shaking hands.
No, that's right. I mean, they're crucial, and you've got to figure out, right? Like, for some people, they're comfortable here, right? But that's not going to be for everybody you want to work with. And, pick up the phone, like do some other things. Like it's a media mix, it's a channel strategy. It's a media mix. I mean, that's really the way to think about it. Sure.
So getting back to Henry Mickelberg's comment, where he's here for some golden nuggets from what's happening at Lockheed Martin. I mean, what could you leave us with? What are you allowed to share that won't get you in trouble?
I mean, we make a variety of products that, you can follow us on our various channels and learn more.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, for sure. That's the proper way to answer. I have. Well, JT, listen, this has been awesome. We're already at 57 minutes. What if you were to give our audience some parting words? What would they be? And we're going to put how to get in touch with JT again down in the ticker there. So definitely, if you do not know JT, you should. Obviously, he's the coolest guy with a mustache that I know. And I think that you should follow him and like him on LinkedIn. So give us some parting words, JT. What is it that we should know from you that makes you such a valuable person in this world?
Hey, so, I mean, I think, one takeaway, right, is that, digital isn't magical. Right. I think that, one of the great challenges in digital and social media is that it's just part of a toolkit. And I've talked to that, throughout today's conversation. I think the opportunity, is to, think very carefully about, what it is you're trying to achieve, but ultimately, the way you communicate, the way you market is really only as good as the products and services you offer. So, you can't have a great campaign if you don't have a great product. And I think, that's something that's really critical as you do that planning, as you think through what it is that you want to accomplish, that, hey, like, digital and social is a very powerful tool, but it's only as good as the reputation that sits behind it.
Hey, spoken from the guy who is heading up social media for several companies: Comcast, Lockheed Martin. I'm glad it's all on the screen. Ford, Chevrolet, I mean, honestly, this has been such a pleasure, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to sit with Miles and I today and have this conversation. Miles, if you got something you want to ask, now's the time, man, because I'm sure JT's going back to the busy life of Lockheed Martin.
No, I'm good. I'll let him have the last word with that final nugget, and I'll just echo what Dave said, that we appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate it, JT. All right, everybody. Listen, thank you so much for joining us today. JT, do not go anywhere after the outro. We'll wrap this up. I'm Dave Cooper and Miles Biggs Ideas. If you don't know Miles, you should. Top 5 podcast. Buy his book, right? Unseen Work, just launched, and watch his new TED Talk that he has out there. So really proud of Miles and everything he does. I need to be an overachiever just like these two, and I'm working real hard to learn. So that's it, everybody. I am Dave Cooper. Thank you for joining. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to be talking about the carbon footprint, or are we? Because is carbon footprint the right word, or is it carbon disaster that we all create? Got to tune in tomorrow at 1 o'clock with myself and Mark Bare Naked Willie. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.